So I have a presentation. I think you can, I'm not sure if you can see it yet or if you're sharing it. But basically, the presentation is going to be a brief story about how the city of Buenos Aires actually decided to implement nature-based solution. When I'm referring to the city of Buenos Aires, I'm only saying it about the capital city in Argentina, which is about 3 million people inhabitants. The metropolitan area is much larger. But we have been working directly with the government of the city of Buenos Aires for at least, I think, like 10 years already. So Buenos Aires, it's a coastal city, very flat, and it's lying next to the La Plata Story. So it's located in the delta of the La Plata River. So you can go to the next one. The bank has had a long story on flood risk management with Argentina. I think more than 25 years. The first projects were actually starting from pure recovery after a really severe El Nino. And then it slowly started changing to generating knowledge and making plans, so for a more planning and informed decision making. And then in 2005, we started directly working with the city of Buenos Aires, but it was mostly on gray infrastructure, although the master plan had also what we said non-structural measures. The first implementing project was very focused on, these huge tunnels that actually took most of the funds of the loans. So the second project, that is the project that finally financed nature-based solutions, was trying to fill these gaps, and foster more the non-structural measures, although we had a big infrastructure piece to be implemented. I think at that time, I'm just making my memory, I think at that time, Niels was one of the peer reviewers of that project. And actually, the city government was not interested at all in implementing nature-based solutions. Next. Well, as many other cities, the relationship with urban water has actually changed through times. So located in a delta area, originally there was many creeks that actually crossed the city. And in 1869, the sewers started to appear. It was a response of yellow fever here in Argentina. Then the problem became more on the flooding issues. So in 1924, they started, to bury the creeks with these big tunnels. So the city actually started to lose the contact with the natural water. And then finally, as I mentioned, in the years 2000, there was a master plan that mentioned the importance of, having some nature-based solution accompanying really big gray infrastructure to be built. But in the early stages of implementation of that plan, they were focusing more on the gray infrastructure. And well, right now in 2023, the city already has a new strategy where the water becomes a central asset to the city, and they want to use it to improve not only flood risk management, but to adapt to climate change, and also to bring more tourism to the city. Next. So the next slide. So but how the city really adopted this interest in nature-based solutions? Can you change the slide? I don't see.
It's not moving on your side?
No, but okay, then it's okay. So I think the city started to understand the multiple benefits. When we were preparing the project, we all already had mentioned the importance of having, water as a key asset and driving the planning of the city, but they were not really sure about it because, they have been doing things like this for such a long time. that they really did not see the opportunity of, changing how they were doing, they were managing urban water. So, well, but they started actually to face, I think we're in the previous slide, in the fourth. So we were able to show during implementation some existing examples of how nature-based solutions were implemented, and they were being successful. And making use of funds that were available in GFDRR was actually part of the deal. We were bringing experts to the city, walking them through the city and asking them what they could see as an opportunity. There were study tours to Japan, to the Netherlands. There was exchanges with other cities. Actually, the city of Buenos Aires signed an agreement with the city of Copenhagen that was focusing more on water, but in transport. They became part of the C40. And they have to write climate change adaptation plans, because actually climate change was impacting them. The intensity and the frequency of rains have been changing, so the design events for the gray infrastructure are no longer valid. So, for example, if they were designing for 10-year return period, this is with the current data they have, it's actually only for 8 years return period. So climate change is really impacting them. And I guess we also owe a little bit to the pandemic, and I'm gonna say something about it later. So the next one. The city has a lot of challenges to overcome. So I mentioned all of them, some of them already. Climate change. They are also a big institutional fragmented government. So, for example, they have the institution governing transport within the city is completely separate from those who are, managing urban drainage. Water and sanitation utility is managed at the national level, and it's a concession area that is larger than City of Buenos Aires. And, this utility do not respond to the city government. They also have, the public space maintenance is in a different, institutional part of the city government. So it's really hard to actually make them work together. There is a huge fear to innovate, as I mentioned that already. So why to change if things are going well? And they are, the current political party has been in charge of the administration of the city for at least 3 periods already. So why to innovate? What does it bring to that we don't know? And that's really linked to the public perception thing. Every time they want to innovate, citizens go out and say, why do you want to change things? There's a lot of issues in there. There's a scarce public areas, and there's always like a fight on what to do with them. There are water quality issues with the existing creeks that actually come from, the upper part of the city with the neighboring municipalities. There is things of lack of awareness. People do not know that they live in a delta area, and they were used to go creeks all around. So next. But what gave us the opportunity to actually do a nature-based solutions if the city wasn't interested at all? They were evaluating the possibility of doing some secondary drainage networks. It's like painted in pink in this picture. But they were also assessing the idea of increasing the area or the capacity of the main pipe that's in purple painted there. That's where the original creek comes. It's the Arroyo Sildañez. And during a mission, they were telling us that they were going to finance this under the project, but we saw this huge park next to it. So the bank team included some experts at the time, and they were asking them, well, what do you don't assess the opportunity to use some retention areas so you don't have to increase that much the existing capacity of the Sildañez pipe. So it became like compulsory an agreement during mission that they had to at least assess that opportunity. And they see that technically it made sense. They actually didn't have to increase that much the capacity of the Maldonado if they were doing this big retention area in an existing public space. Actually, it was consulted as a big one system. So and all the documents, the design, the environmental impact assessment, the social assessment, and all the public consultations were done by this system. It was not only the retention area, but the whole drainage system. And it actually came very positive. People just requested that the area was maintained dry so they could have, soccer fields if they wanted to use in this area. So next. This is a picture of how it looked like. So you don't see a lot of neighbors around it. It's just a big public space. It wasn't used at that time for any, sport or any activity in particular. Next. Next. So when digging the area, they realized that the water table was higher. So this is a very big issue here in the city of Buenos Aires. So they had to build a pumping station that kept this space very dry. So this is a series of pictures that shows how this looked like in 2012, so before the project. So the next click. This is when they decide to prepare, the area. Works have started, and in the upper part of the pictures, there was going to be installed this pumping station. Next. This is how it ended. So this is when the construction finalized in 2020. So we didn't have COVID at the time, and the pumping station was working 24/7 because they needed to have this area dry as it was requested by the neighbors. Next. So COVID hit, and there was, we all had been stranded in our houses. And when the government officials that were handling this contract in particular, this area in particular, they went there 7 or 8 months after COVID hit, they actually saw there was water there. So the pump motors were stolen, and there was water coming into the reservoir. So, well, people had already started going to the park because you don't no longer need to stay at home. And they actually said, we would like it better like this. So nature took over. The system was tested technically, and it worked, because there was only one fraction of water occupying the space. And this became really important for neighbors. They actually started asking for, public mobiliary. They requested for a bike lane. They requested for a jogging lane. They requested for more lights so they could come at night. They requested picnic and sitting areas. So this became part of their lives. And now it's such an important bird watching spot. So with this time, the city has transformed its vision. Next. These are just some pictures of how, the city has been involving the neighbors to, planting trees and coming to the place, making their own. Next. And it becomes like a really enjoyable area to be around. Next. So the city started changing their vision, and they presented to the bank a new strategy into 2020. Next. They want water as an asset. They want to be their citizens be aware that water is in the city. Next. So they already have a huge presentation on what's their vision and what are the future implementation of activities. Next. There are some already pilot projects. In some of them, they were presented like 2 years ago to become part of this current project. But as you may know, this project is pretty old, and at the time of implementation, the people, the neighbors where these pilot or projects were presented, they were not really happy with them. So we see that the city is going to still face these challenges on not awareness. Next. You see why, this is how it looked like in 1920 something in the exact same spot right now. So people living there in the same area, they have absolutely no idea there is a creek underground. Next. There is this problem of rising water tables, and so people is really afraid of getting flooded by this rising water table, and it's going to be really difficult for the city to tackle this issue because it's not only because of the existing infrastructure and the climate change impacts, but it's also because of the drinking water and sanitation leakages in this area. Next. So the first picture was what was built in the 30s, and this is what was built under this project. Next. And there is this issue of public perception. Every time that they are trying to innovate with these green spaces and green areas, neighbors say, okay, this is good, but go do it somewhere else. So there are three pictures here, if you click on them, on some public newspapers. So the first two are about this idea that they wanted to do, this kind of project. So we see there's some concrete, and it's not really nice in terms of paisagistic issue and landscape. Next. And this is actually what the city presented to us, the render. So you see there is like a misconception what people understand from the project and what the city wants to do, and the city is gonna still need so much more time to work with the neighbors and make sure they understand what the project is about and why they are doing it. So one of the lessons learned here is that you need to take opportunities and put these nature-based solution investments within a larger setting. Else, I think the discussion becomes too central to whether to leave one tree or just, or change a park. And it's really difficult in that discussion. But if you present a larger picture and you try to explain that this is going to work together with something else, I think it's easier for people to understand. And also, there is a lot of things on misconception and public awareness. So you need to tell the people that they are living in a floodable area, and that these kind of solutions will actually help to decrease the risk. And well, this is something that I think it's important that this investment that it's going to need more time because the city really wants to do it, was done in a like middle upper class neighborhood, and they were like, okay, don't tell us, we know it, this is good, but do it somewhere else. It's like a huge NIMBY project. While we were doing it originally, it was in a lower income area, and it didn't become that clear for them. It was an improvement of their situation. Next. So about the future, the city has already changed their vision. I presented them, and I think that was the more important seed. They are seeing water as an asset, and they are using them to improve their planning in the city. Next. So these are some of the ideas, if you click, of the ideas they have to continue working with water, nature-based solutions, not only tackling flood risk management issues, but also, generating adapting to climate change, improving environment, making it more positive for the people to come here. This is a very touristic city, so they are trying to attract more tourism to it, and they are trying to, become more lively. Next. They're also trying to depave some streets among all the pilots they want. So I think that was all that I wanted to say. So hopefully there are some questions I can respond to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catalina. Fascinating. Just want to make one precision. I'm not old enough to have been part of the first 97 flood project, but I have been following this over the years especially when I was still in LAC. And it's fascinating to see how it's basically 30 years of bank engagement that has, of course, evolved over time, and where it's now maybe even changing how the city thinks of its own urban planning, its own urban fabric, and itself as a city, and how the city attracts people. Hold your questions if you have any, or put them in the chat. Otherwise, hold them so you can ask them after we have heard the next presentation. We will now shift continent and jump over to Africa and hear about the engagements in Dakar. We have Isabel and Cécile, who will, well, you will let us know how you're going to run the presentation, but just briefly to introduce both of you. Isabel is a senior disaster risk management specialist. She's based in Dakar, has worked on, I think, but Isabel can correct me when or if I'm wrong, on the entire history of our flood risk management engagement in Dakar, which is also quite long and impressive. She also works on a number of other disaster risk management areas, including flood risk management, both in the urban space and the coastal space. Cécile is not based in Dakar, but works on urban resilience engagements across, currently mostly across West Africa, and has been working on these topics with the bank and for the bank for a while. I'm not going to say exactly how long. And as I said, currently focusing on West Africa. I think Cécile will do the presentation, but it's you guys let me know who speaks first. Over to you.
Thank you, Niels. So we're going to share this presentation. Isabel will start and give you much more of the context. As you said, she's been working in Senegal for many years, so much more than I have. So I'll let Isabel start. Let me just put this in slideshow. There.
Thank you, Cécile. Thank you, Niels, and thank you to all colleagues for giving us the opportunity to share the Senegal experience in terms of nature-based solution. In fact, I will share with you the flood general context and key challenge the country and the World Bank funded project has to deal with. And Cécile will share with you the NBS experience. I confess that were critical part of the sustainable solution to manage flood in the Dakar peri-urban area. This is not the first slide. Cécile.
Can you see it? It's the situation slide. This one.
Okay, no problem. I will, yes, first of all, the Dakar is the peninsula with a succession of plain.
Isabel, you got muted somehow.
Sorry, you are just trying to fix the presentation. Okay, this is the first slide. In fact, I would like to share with you the geographical context and yes, because Dakar is a peninsula with a succession of plain, dune, and interdune lake or wetland. We call locally Nyai. And during the 70s drought, many people moved from the rural area to Dakar in the city because of a heavy drought. And these people settled in the lowest area, in the wetland. But with the increase of precipitation from 2000, led to the revitalization of all this wetland and serious flood that affected the forest population. And as we go along, the natural waterways were progressively urbanized. Next slide. Next, please. Yes, as you can hear, the recent, as you can see here, the recent flood the city experienced were in 2020 with 150,000 people affected, 10,000, more than 10,000 houses destroyed, and in 2022 or so, the city was also affected. And this happened every 2 and 3 years since 2005. And next slide, please. Yes, what we are trying to show in this slide also is that the city, in terms of greenhouses, the situation of the city is very worrying because there are only 0.50 meters square of green space per inhabitant, while the OMS norm is at least 10 meters square. What we can notice is also is that 50% of the country's population is living in Dakar region, which represent only 0.3% of the national territory, which is very, yes, which is a big issue. Next slide. And from 2012, the bank, through the project called named Stormwater Management and Climate Change Adaptation Project, starting supporting the government finding sustainable and integrated solution to this urban flooding. First of all, between 2012 to 2021, for 121 million IDA funding. And after that, with a follow-up project named Project 2 also, that was approved in 2021. And the Project 2 is consolidating the former project, the closed project approach and achievement as more and more urbanized zone based on the city's extension is being covered with drainage infrastructure by gravitation, but also through the support of local and national authorities, through technical assistance to support and empower local and national authorities for better resilient urban planning and control. And because this project is the two projects were successful in addressing the issue in the covered zone, the CME is providing an additional financing of 135 million that is expected to be delivered during this 4 years. This is in general the context of flood issue in Senegal, specifically in Dakar, using really an integrated approach for sustainable solution. I will let Cécile share with you part of the solution that were funded under this project, namely nature-based solution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Isabel. So we wanted to share with you how this project helped with nature-based solution. It's a totally different context than the one that was presented by Catalina in Buenos Aires. As Isabel said, urbanization is really taking over any green spaces that are in Dakar. I just had a very long visit this morning, and it's hard to see green spaces. There are a few of them that are still existing and that the government and the project are trying to protect, and some of them we're gonna talk in this BBL, the Mbao forest, the Technopole, and also lakes that are located on the east side of Dakar. Oops, there. So this is not the current situation. This is a part of the urban planning documents that were produced by the project, and it's a prospective vision that the project helped develop to protect the areas on the east side of Dakar. So you have on the far left the Technopole Niayes wetland, the series of lakes that were initially interconnected and separated by urbanization on the top of the slide, and the Mbao forest, which I'm going to talk in a few minutes, on the right. So the NBS that were promoted through the projects are the one described here. So open green spaces, urban forest, urban farming, and wetlands. We will first talk about the wetland of Niayes Pikine. It is called the Technopole, and the reason why it's called like this is because there was a plan at some point to make a Technopole on this that was dropped by the government. And basically the idea nowadays is to protect this area, which is very rich in biodiversity, from other candidates for urban development on this wetland. So as you can see, from 1978 to 2014, and it's even worse today, there has been a very an urbanization that has taken over most of the wetland surface, and this is still ongoing. So in the region, which in the neighborhood, which is called the Dalifort neighborhood, which is south of the Niayes Pikine wetland, there has been several episodes of extremely serious flooding. So the project one has helped solution the drainage infrastructure that was actually from the outlet was actually pouring the water in the direction of the wetland and on the road that separate the wetland from this neighborhood. So the hill engineer drainage system was really threatening both the neighborhood, sewage treatment plant, the road, and incidentally the wetland itself. So the project one really helped redirecting the drainage water and allowed for a valve system so that now the outlet is draining the water to the sea, protecting the wetland, and the valves helps to keep enough water in the wetland while evacuating all the stormwater to the sea. That's one example. The second example I wanted to tell you about is the Mbao forest. And again, the project really is trying to use the current existing natural land to restore the absorptive capacity of the soil. So several retention basins were secured and created in the Mbao forest. And one of the main advantage of this project was that it worked in synergies with local farmers that needed access to water. So there has been collaboration and consultation, and one of the results, among many other, is that the project is willing to install a solar water pump for the farmers, in addition to other development within the Mbao forest that is currently developed by the government, which will also help the use of the forest by citizens. As for now, the forest is quite still isolated and not necessarily used as it could be, as people haven't been incentivized to use this forest as a leisure area. Another example, as you saw on the map, are the various lakes that are located on the southeast of Dakar, so like Johor, Waruai, Oye. And as you saw on the map, their connection had been cut by urbanization. And one of the objective of the project was to first develop a drainage master plan, but the principle of this master plan was really to use the existing hydrographic network and help restoring it as far as possible, not using pumps, but really gravitational network. So as you can see here on the map, there has been an effort to reconnect the lake and use the outlet to the sea, so that the project would help restore the natural pathway of the water. So here's the work, an example of the works that were conducted to reconnect the lakes. So, and so as I just said, we really, in the project, wanted to use a gravitational drainage and have a watershed approach. So the design really emphasized gravity drainage of stormwater, but also with a system of valves that would prevent lakes also from drying while protecting the population from floods. So one of the challenges, again, is that we were planning to make to install public amenities and have several nature-based solutions around the lake. And in the matter, and this was initially planned in the project 2 project. However, in a matter of 2 years, because the project actually helped solving the flood risk, people, I mean, the urban development became much prominent in this zone, precisely because they were protected. And in a matter of 2 years, the zone where the nature-based solutions were planned were now urbanized. So when we say that in Dakar the urbanization is happening at a extremely fast rate, this is one example. So about other NBS initiatives, and I would say more common here. we wanted to present the example of the urban pole of Diamniadio. Diamniadio is a flagship project of the Senegal, of the Dakar region authorities. It's a new developing city of 2,000 hectares, more or less 30 kilometers east from Dakar. This pole has been developed because of the forecasted demographic boom. And the land has been liberated, notably because of the relocation of administrative activity. And for the project, the idea was to defend a space where a park would be installed, despite competing priorities such as the university, a convention center, offices, or commercial facilities. So I won't go into details, but there has been many conversation and negotiation with the developers to secure land in the Diamniadio area to create a park. So this is what the land would look like before, and the project allowed to create the Emergence Park. So for those interested, there has been a very interesting work on local species for trees and plants that would resist drought and the specific condition of the region. I won't go into detail, but if you're interested, we have the reports. And one of the challenges for this park was really the problem of maintenance and the lack of resources to maintain this newly created green space. Other example, so this is a retention basin that was formerly not developed, and where we collaborated with the population around to plant the basin and to create public amenities so that people would appropriate the zone and also would accept. As you can see, most of our retention basins are closed. This is to protect from drowning and from dumping of solid waste. But when you develop public amenities around the retention basin while preserving the visibility of the water, as you can see, you can still use the basin as a leisure area, even though it is closed and the access is closed for the public. So when I discuss the challenges, as you heard, we often mention the problem of maintenance of these amenities. And one of the solutions that the project 1 and 2 developed was what we call the PICS, project of community interest. And the idea is that when we are constructing the flood risk infrastructure, most of the time these are in neighboring, totally lacking public amenities for leisure. And communities are invited to concert among themselves and propose a project to the project. And the idea is that the project provide technical assistance and funds to those communities so that the amenities are created, but there is a commitment of the communities to help with the upkeep and to preserve the space that are created. And what we are testing in the project 2 is having income generating activities associated to this newly created either promenade, green spaces, etc. So for example, there has been a soccer field created, and for the teams to play on the soccer field, they have to pay a little fee, which is afterwards used for the maintenance of the field. So there are many others income generating activities that are investigated, including, of course, farming. And that would help with the upkeep of the newly created public spaces. So just to sum up very quickly, when we talk about challenges in implementing nitrate-based solution, we can have competing activities, of course, competing with the urbanization, because as I said, it is very difficult in the Dakar region with a booming demographic to preserve green spaces. But while making synergies with farming activities, the public authorities really managed to create an activity in the Mbao forest, which is also helping to protect it from urbanization, because when you have farmers, people are more likely to preserve the area and not to develop into or onto the forest. Another very important point is really seizing opportunities. There's a lot of competition for land availability. So it was important in the case of Jamnia to push during the development of the Jamnia pole and make sure that the authority would keep some space for park and absorptive soil amenities. Same for the Technopole. There's really much efforts currently occurring to preserve the Technopole wetlands from other ideas of development on that site. And finally, the idea of using public amenities and the energy of the community for maintaining green spaces and leisure parks is also something that proved very efficient both in the Project 1 and Project 2, and is really one of the success of the project, to work with citizens to make sure those public spaces are respected and promoted with new type of activities. And that's my last slide. So the Project 1 closed in 2021. And it was the opportunity to collect a number of lessons learned. As I said, protect the spaces and grasp opportunities. It's not always you don't always need to create new spaces. First, preserve what exists in a very proactive way. Empower community, make sure to involve them from the start. Associate that with income generating activities. That's the best way to make sure that the place would be preserved. And in our case, it was mainly associated to the creation of rain overflow basin and green spaces. One important thing in both Project 102 is our motto was work with the water, not against. Try to follow the former hydrographic networks that has been cut by urbanization, respect the boundaries of the watershed, and as far as possible, use gravitational drainage that restore natural pathway for water. And finally, start with better planning and governance. So we didn't insist, but a very important aspect of both Project 1 and 2 is the development of decision-making tools that takes into account the institutional and financial situation. So diagnosis, not only stormwater or drainage master plan, but really trying to work with the institution to improve governance, along with the traditional tools that we use, or flood risk mapping, or inclusive urban planning that integrate climate risk. And that's the end of our presentation, and we would be happy to answer any question that you might have.
Thank you very much, Isabel and Cecile. To kick off the Q&A, we've asked Philippe to share a few thoughts from his perspective. Philippe, he's a senior disaster risk management specialist. He works with the MENA region, so his work focuses on different elements of disaster risk management and resilient recovery in the Middle East and North Africa region. In particular, I believe with work in Morocco, Tunisia, Yemen, Lebanon, Iraq, and now Chad, which is not really in MENA, but he's working there anyway on these issues. So Philippe, a few words from you, and then anyone else, please ready your microphones or plug in your question in the chat. We'll get to you in a few minutes. Philippe.
Thank you so much, Niels, and thanks to Catalina and Isabel and Cecile for the great presentations. I think it was really nice to have them very visual, no, to really see the impact that nature-based solutions can provide and how they can make cities feel and be more livable. I think the two examples were also well chosen because they represent in a way also very different city and country contexts. You know, one more IBRD middle income, the other more lower income IDA. But at the same time, both of the presentations or the engagements are really showing a long-standing bank engagement that really set the stage, I think, for looking at nature-based solutions as opposed to just, you know, the traditional classic gray infrastructure approach. So I want to just, you know, take stock of the core themes, I think, that run a little bit through the two case studies. And I think there are a few, you know, common lessons that emerge. I think the first one for me is really that creating this consensus around the NBS opportunities in flood risk management specifically is taking a lot of time, right? I mean, you need to really have a long-standing engagement. We saw in Catalina's presentation that, you know, the engagement in Buenos Aires really took a couple of decades to move and to convince policy and decision makers to really look into the green solutions and not just focus on the gray ones. And similar in Dakar, you know, this is not a single project, but it's really an engagement that span, you know, 10, 15 years, and that has progressively built and made the case and the rationale for investing in nature-based solutions. And I think, you know, realizing that is important as we, you know, want to push a lot more for these type of solutions. And I think the presentations also showed that from the bank side, there are a couple of very pragmatic things that, you know, task teams can do to really foster the dialogue and make the case for NBS, right? So in Catalina's presentation, you know, one very pragmatic way was really to send, you know, NBS experts on missions to identify opportunities, because sometimes it's really just being on the mission and talking very specifically about a specific investment opportunity that you can make a link to NBS and then, you know, create an interest on the government side. And I think, you know, she mentioned that this has actually really worked out in one specific case, I think, for the retention pond. Similarly, you know, we have these very interesting study tours and you know, the deep dives that GFDR is organizing with Tokyo that I think can really be helpful to just bring decision makers along the way and help them see the opportunities. And again, this was really coming out of Catalina's presentation. So it takes time, but then opportunities open up, and you know, I think that's a really important consideration. The second one is really around community engagement, and I think this came out as well in both presentations. It's a topic that, you know, in a way, the solutions affect people's lives, and there is initially, as we have seen in the Buenos Aires case, a lot of skepticism around what they can do, and maybe maybe there's, you know, communities are saying, you know, this is great, but why is it in our neighborhood? Maybe we shouldn't be the guinea pigs. Maybe we should do it somewhere else. And I think therefore it's really important to reach out to communities, you know, show the potential and make them part of the decision-making process. And I think the example in Buenos Aires of the retention pond project is really great, because it really showed how it got community engagement, how they in the end were really key in also deciding on what would be how it would be looking like, very specifically, regarding tree planting, bike lanes, an opportunity to have a space for bird watching. And I think this shows that it's really critical to involve these communities already in the project design phase, and then as well, as we have seen in the Senegal case, not just in the design but also in the implementation. And I think Cécile spoke to that, right? That making sure communities are engaged throughout the implementation is critical, not just to gain this acceptance, but also to make sure that they very pragmatically can support on the operations and maintenance side, and to ensure that some of these solutions, like the created green public spaces, are really kept up with community support. And I like the link to the income generating opportunities that Cécile mentioned around urban farming and agriculture. And then the third common or lesson learned is that I think both examples show that once you have these wins, once you have shown that the nature-based solutions work, there is this opportunity to take them to scale, right? By looking not just at the investment level, but really linking it to a more strategic and policy level. And we saw in Buenos Aires, there's this 2050 plan now that really tries to integrate green solutions in the city from an urban master plan perspective. And I think, if you probably look back 15, 20, 30 years, that would have been impossible. But having these pilot projects like the retention pond is setting up the stage for a much more strategic discussion with city leaders around integrating nature-based solutions. And we see it as well in Senegal, right? In Dakar, where Cécile and Isabelle mentioned, that the land is very scarce. There's a competition around for NBS. And in a way, the only way to really solve this sustainably in the long term is really to embed these solutions in the urban master planning. And just to make a quick side note, as Niels mentioned, I've been working over the last year and a half on an urban resilience project in Chad, where we in a way also looked at it from both angles, from a pilot angle and more from a strategic longer term angle, where we try to establish and implement a community-led investment program where communities can really have a say in selecting their own investments at neighborhood level, with a big focus on NBS, while at the same time we're trying to work at a more strategic level by integrating NBS into the urban master plans and in the flood risk management strategic plans. So I think both need to go hand in hand. And then let me just close by just a quick putting out quickly my regional head and just a few reflections on what this means also for MENA. I think it's a region with a lot of similar challenges to the ones that we have seen. A lot of cities with huge urban resilience challenges, a big focus on flood risk, but not a lot of awareness amongst policymakers. So I really hope we can take some of the lessons learned around, being persistent, raising awareness, and also making sure communities really understand what they're about, and taking this to MENA, where I think NBS can also have a really great side benefit, not just in terms of flood risk management, but also in terms of the urban heat island effect. I saw this statistics recently that, last year for the first time, there were many, I think 4 or 5 cities in MENA that had repeatedly more than 50 degrees Celsius over the summer. And basically the summer period now in MENA will really be 4 months of, sustained high temperatures beyond 50 degrees. In some cities, in the next 20 years, it will go up to 60 degrees. This is completely unlivable if you don't have access to air conditioning, and most people in the region won't. So I think, looking at NBS also from that angle specifically in MENA will be really important, and we need to make sure we make the pitch for it now, so that this can then pay off in the medium to long term. Let me stop here. Over back to you, Niels, and thanks again to Catalina, Isabel, and Cécile for really great conversation starters.
Thanks a lot, Philippe. Excellent points. I do not actually see any hands or comments. Yeah, I just thought for a second that Cécile's thumb up was a hand, but it was really just a thumb up. Maybe a quick reaction from my side then, while I'll still give you all a chance to come in with a question. On the technical support, of course, there's a great opportunity for me to offer a plug for what we from our global position might be able to offer those of you who are out there working on projects, both on when it comes to urban heat, but also when it comes to anything NBS for resilience. We do have tools, methods, approaches to create both sort of a first order understanding of urban heat, but also a deeper, high resolution understanding of urban heat. And in addition to that, understanding of cost benefit of different approaches to how to use nature to help with urban heat. We're working with teams across MENA, Africa, parts of ECA, on urban heat currently. It's a big issue for many of your clients out there. So please do come to us if you have technical questions around any of that you would like help with, and we will help if we can. I see a question from Chandan. Fabulous. Chandan, do you want to come in and ask it yourself?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering about the hesitation that clients often seem to feel about pursuing nature-based solutions. What are some of the main reasons for that? And what have been some of the approaches that the various teams have taken in trying to overcome that hesitation? Thanks.
I may come in to try to respond. In the case of Buenos Aires, I think it was kind of this fear to innovate. As I mentioned, like there's a lot of public sensibility regarding public spaces, and I think Cecile and Isabel also mentioned there's always interest in different interests in these public spaces. So, well, some people want a soccer field, some people want, there's may, go it for the private development, etc. So actually having space dedicated for a nature-based solution, it will be criticized for many in the city. So in the case of the city of Buenos Aires, government said, we're fine like this. Let's keep, putting pipes underground, and people will actually not, bother about them. So there's a lot of fear, and there's a lot of public sensibility. So I guess, trying to work with communication and also providing the good examples to the decision makers, saying it's worth taking the risk, but it will need, time and effort and a lot of resources to actually convince the public that this is a good way to use the public space. I think that's one of the reasons for the hesitation.
Isabel, you want to?
Okay. Yeah, I would just like to add that this hesitation sometimes we have political reason behind this hesitation, because politics like investment project visible, they can use for their to convince population during election and so on. But as World Bank urban staff and technician, it's our role to show that hard solutions are not compulsory the best solution. It's our role to show good practice, to share good practice, and to show to the politicians, to the communities, that we need to combine hard and nature-based solution to have good impact and rentable impact also. And I'm sure that this hesitation is not something definitive. We should work on it, and we should help highlight all the good thing when using a natural-based solution, hand to hand with hard solution.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Isabel, do you want to?
Sure.
Niels, very quickly, if I can add up a little bit, at least here in the specific context of Dakar, as we said, it's really a vital competition for space. We show at the beginning, we have such a high density of people. 50% of the urban population is living in 0.3% of the territory. So it's really who is going to be first, and in that type of competition, nature very rarely wins. However, when you go too far in that direction, of course, you hit the limits. And for example, when I presented the lakes at the, on the very north area, at the very beginning, the project was planning to have a long green belt to protect the littoral. In a matter of few years, this belt is already half urbanized. But the thing is, because the littoral is threatened, finally, the government is accepting that there's a long band of filao that somehow should be preserved. So without being catastrophic, it's also sometimes when the nature is showing its limits that we can have a better way of advocate for preserving and creating more green spaces that are actually protecting the land. So.
Sorry. Thanks, Boris. I need to turn on the mic for you all to be able to hear me. Thanks. We got now a few comments coming in from some of you. That's great. We have Ankita asking about quantification of the impact of NBS. I think I will probably ask Boris to say a few words on that, since he spent quite a lot of time writing a guideline about it. Then we have some questions around maintenance of NBS investments in the longer term. I think I'll push that back to you project folks to say a few words on how you are, I imagine, struggling with that. Or if you have solved it, please let us all know and we'll nominate you for some sort of prize. And Klaas is asking specifically about any work or relation or knowledge related to the health aspects of water quality and waste disposal, because the original reason to cover up the water in Buenos Aires was related also to diseases, which I think is true for many urban areas. Many urban areas turn the back on water because of diseases. So anyone with insights on vector-borne diseases, that would be fabulous. Let's take those three. So first to Boris.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Niels. So yeah, maybe actually just to do some shameless advertising. We've been working on a guideline with our partners in different universities and other technical partners on a guideline to assess and quantify the impact, the benefits and cost also of nature-based solutions. So that is actually something that will be launched next week. So there will be an invitation in your inbox on that, hopefully today, to that event. But yeah, so I think one of the critical steps is to do that. So we can of course make the claim that nature-based solutions help to address your resilience challenges, but of course we need to do good modeling to actually quantify the impact where it is on either on flooding or like what we just discussed, reducing extreme heat, ambient temperatures, or the other benefits. So I think we talked a bit about some of the amenities that Cecile mentioned. So it can be recreational values. It can also be income generating activities, for example, through agriculture. I think in many countries where you see that, well, this competition for space and encroachment and is a main problem. I think it's agriculture and these income generating activities, they can actually be a development control, right? If the existing kind of development control mechanisms are not really effective. So yes, to do all this and to understand what kind of designs, what kind of interventions work, yeah, it's critical to do a good cost benefit analysis and to do good modeling also on the biophysical side to understand to what extent your solution can actually reduce flooding, or can actually reduce temperatures, or can provide these other benefits. Maybe Catalina or Cecile also want to say something about how their project did this, yeah, maybe I'll stick to that here.
So maybe, sorry, my bad.
Not me.
No, it's me.
Okay.
It's just me trying to manage to setups here, because I only see the chats on my screen, but of course everything is connected in the room. All right. Cecile, Isabel, Catalina, the maintenance question. So anything or approaches that you have put in place in the project context related to the maintenance, and if you wish, you can say a few words on how your project context handled the cost benefit analysis. Thanks.
Isabel, you want to go ahead about the future of PICs?
Yes, I can say a little bit about the community engagement, drainage network operation and maintenance. I think that this is the first thing to do when you want all this infrastructure, drainage infrastructure, including retention basin, natural-based solution, and so on, crossing the different area is the first thing to do. You should work with the communities and help them see their interest in what you are doing. The first thing is to share with them a clear message so that they understand that if this is not well maintained, the situation will be flooding will come back, the area will come again, and all this investment, which are very expensive, will be a waste of money, and really to convince them. And the second thing is to help them have a local initiative to put in place what we call in our project investment, community investment project, that can be a project that generate income, or that can be a project that finance urban amenities. In any case, this should be an interest for them, and so that they can be committed in the maintenance. What we are doing also, we are working hand in hand with the Solid Waste project funded by the bank, and to commit these communities in the cleaning around the drainage network, including the retention basin and the natural base, where we have developed a natural-based solution. The Solid Waste project train the community, provide train the community, give them technical assistance, support them, give them the capacity, the needed capacity to clean, and as a flood project, we provide to them the material and so on, and we help them to be autonomous, so that after the project they can continue leading this kind of activities, which is an activity source of income also. Thank you.
In the case of Buenos Aires, I think there was nothing innovative regarding maintenance. Basically, the city of Buenos Aires, it's been maintaining this this infrastructure, this nature-based solution, as part of their drainage system, the regular drainage system. In this case, it was kind of this, you know, it was justified because it was a saving from the original idea they had to. It was to increase the area of an existing tunnel. So yeah, I think they're saying as public goods and finance through the general budget that comes from the taxes, from property taxes in the city of Buenos Aires. I'm gonna say something regarding the impacts. As I mentioned, this nature-based solution was not part of the original project design, so it was not quantified. It was not involved in the economic assessment. Throughout the project, we have been working with you guys on development of an assessment of what the impacts are in general on nature-based solutions in the city of Buenos Aires, and I think these numbers are going to be used for the ICR, which is going to be ready, I think, in a year or something.
Thanks, Catalina. We have, I think we have there's 2 other questions that we haven't gotten, 3 other questions. No one volunteered to take on the question on vector-borne diseases from class. So that one is still pending. We have another question on indicators. I know that Boris can try to address that to some extent from this side, unless someone else wants to address it. And then I see a raised hand from Andre. Andre, why don't you come in while the other folks think about the answer? And then with that round, we're going to probably round off and close off the event. Andre.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's logical because I actually have a follow-on question to Buenos Aires and generally on the maintenance costs. And it's a quick one. Essentially, while it was kind of like it's happy to hear that basically the managed maintenance of the solution provided was basically business as usual maintenance. But speaking of the car case, maybe and other nature-based solutions, is there thinking about what's the incremental cost of operating expenses, maintenance expenses going forward compared to the business as usual maintenance costs? Because essentially sometimes I think the hesitation to implement those nature-based solutions is not just because it's innovative or it's just changing things, but sometimes people just understand, in my view, that it is just going to be costlier to maintain going forward. That's what we, for instance, hear in some places like in India, in Tanzania. So in the question about Buenos Aires, what's the cost increment in your view of the implemented solution in terms of I'm not talking about the capital costs, right, the upfront costs, but future operating costs. If there's any thinking on that, if there's any transparency on that in the projects that you've been doing.
To be honest, I don't have the numbers. I would have to go to the city to ask them if there's any incremental cost. I don't think there is a huge increment because they were maintaining the park already, you know, and they have to clean it up and they have to, you know, cut the grass and they have to. In this case, I think what the difference is, it's only about the pumping station. And since it's only functioning sometimes, I don't know how expensive that is, but I have to go and ask that. And I don't think the hesitation has come on that side because what we are always looking is for these green spaces to actually turn them into spaces where possibly nature-based solutions can be implemented, and it's not coming up as a real issue. But hopefully with this, when we do the ICR, we will have the numbers, and that's one of the things we want to use if we continue the engagement with the city of Buenos Aires or other cities in Argentina. And I have to say it, and Class has put it in there. I work with Class in this project and other projects on flood risk management. We have prepared a project for interventions in the northern part of Argentina, where there is a huge epidemic cases of dengue, Zika, and chikungunya, and the hesitation has come from that side. You know, they believe that this will be like a mosquito breeding area and will worsen the situation that they are currently having. So that's what we're asking, and we actually had a meeting with an expert, a medical expert, because I didn't know there were like two different mosquitoes, the one with malaria and the one with dengue, and then. This will be like interesting, and I think Boris is also helping us to do. We are also looking into possible nature-based solutions in these northern parts of Argentina, and one of the things that we are considering is, okay, let's do not have stagnant water because it will become a mosquito breeding area. So I hope with all these studies and this implement already that some implemented nature-based solutions, that I think we will have a better understanding about the impact and the costs. But yeah, for sure, we will need to have the numbers at the end. But so far, we do not.
Maybe, Andre, regarding your question about, sorry, Niels, you wanted to?
No, go ahead. Then after you, Boris, and then we'll close.
Okay, very quickly. We were precisely discussing this this morning with the PIU, which is the Municipal Development Agency here, and they were saying that there's an interest from the municipalities to have us helping them develop management plans for new spaces, you know, for new urban spaces. So in the case of Dakar, as you understood from our presentation, we are trying to maintain what is already existing. So, for example, natural wetlands that do not really need other maintenance that just being preserved. In the case of the Mbao forest, as we said, the farmers are really helping maintain the space, and they are doing it because they're getting income out of it. So there's going to be this new development in the forest where there's going to be promenades and new equipments, where definitely, and that was part of the discussion, because it's also managed by the Eaux et Forêts, water and forest sector, but there will be help in developing management plans for specifically this space. That's okay.
Thanks.
Boris, a few thoughts on the indicators.
Yeah, then maybe first of all, really quick to respond to also Andre's question. I think that's a very important point, no? And I think, of course, this is super highly solution dependent, but overall, as you probably were hinting at, is that basically the ratio or the relation between capital costs and operation, like OPEX and CAPEX, is quite different in general for nature-based solutions compared to kind of gray infrastructure. So it's not just a negative thing. I think also in many cases, actually the capital costs are a bit lower. But you're right that usually there is more that we need to factor in more operating costs also in the first years after implementation, right? So you usually need a bit more regular maintenance, and often it also takes a bit of time before all the benefits are, you know, before the NBS is kind of, you know, fully grown, basically. So yeah, that's something definitely important to consider. And in the economic analysis that we've done with the team, we always advocate for that, to make sure that you kind of introduce this time lag in both on the cost side, but also on the benefit side. So just on the indicators, yeah, that's something that I wanted to highlight, that is like we've been actually working with Philip also on the chat project on this, and it's quite important to make sure that we can measure impact, right? So that we try to help teams and to make sure that we actually have sort of outcome related indicators at the PDO level regarding nature-based solutions and natural capital. So if you have, for example, a real indicator that relates the nature-based solutions to the beneficiaries or to the risk reduction of the beneficiaries in a certain area, so that you can actually say, okay, this NBS here has, you know, contributed to reducing the number of the days with extreme heat for so X and X amount of people in the vicinity of the solution will really help us to actually track and measure impact. So if any of you has any questions around that, we're also trying to consolidate and make a database of all the indicators that teams are using. So feel free to come to us and to discuss.
Thanks a lot, Boris. With that, I know we have a few pending questions that we didn't get around to. Thanks a lot to everyone for engaging. A few, I guess, generic thoughts on this on my side. On one hand, I'm super excited to see how much nature-based solution demand that we're getting from bank clients across the world. It really does seem to be taking off pretty fast. There's a lot of you out there who are either already doing work in this area or are coming across questions that creates an opportunity and maybe even a requirement for us as an institution to engage. We on our side at a global level, together in partnership with the water practice and in partnership with the environment group, we are attempting to offer you best available knowledge. So please do reach out if you are working or come across the opportunity to work in this space, and we will share with you whatever we can and help you do the best possible the bank can do. To me, as sort of a generic observation around what does this mean for bank projects trying to address, in these cases, urban flood risk. I think what I'm hearing from both presentations today and from what else I've also seen over the last few years, all the other governance, technical tools, planning tools still apply. Nature-based solution does not take away any of the need to work with all of the rest that the bank might have been comfortable or somewhat comfortable working with over the last decade or the previous decade. It's an additional, or it's a different way of doing some of the same things, but it needs to be integrated with some of the same dialogues. And in that lies both the opportunity and the challenge. The opportunity is that the reason that's driving the demand is probably because it plainly makes sense. It adds values in a number of areas. It adds land value. It helps flood risk management. It adds biodiversity value. The land value it adds is both from the proximity to green locations, which globally is more or less understood as something people like, but also quantifiably, it has a potential in some cases to add income opportunities. Some of you talk about that in your projects. It has a biodiversity value that we're not yet super good at quantifying, but some of you talked about, I think Catalina mentioned, bird species increase, which I imagine future World Bank projects will start to pick up as one of the indicators under the projects eventually. So it plainly makes sense because it adds a number of values, but the downside is it's not that simple. It's a different way of thinking. It requires different technical skills. The typical counterparts who are used to manage urban flood risk are not used to understanding, working with, integrating this type of value, whether it's the health aspect that gives it all a whole different smell, or whether it's plainly understanding the biodiversity value or even the land value is not something that our typical counterparts managing urban flood risk work with. So it's complicated. And therefore, we are trying to offer a technical delta that you can all use. There's many pieces of this. There's the maintenance piece that several of you digged into that is absolutely key. The government capacity to manage green urban space, especially in cities that are urbanizing still with quite some pace, it's got to be one of the key pieces here, because anything that looks flat and green is buildable if you have few means and are looking for a place to settle your livelihood. So those governance elements are not trivial. Anyway, I want to close here. Thanks a lot, in particular, of course, to Isabel, to Catalina, to Cecile, to Philippe. Thanks a lot to my team for setting this whole thing up. Thanks a lot to all of you who logged on. We had about 80 people at some point in the conversation, so clearly there's an interest in the topic, and I hope you will continue to engage with us. We'll certainly continue to try to work with you. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a great day.